Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us for that instructional round that we call Learning Walks. So we got to see Miss Koku, and one of the things I know we always talk about before we walk into a classroom is, look at the factual stuff. We didn't have a lot of conversations with kids while we're in there. We didn't interrupt the lesson. We just collected some factual information. So the focus of that round was that we wanted to look at the elements of our Stallion 7 that we really talked about prior to that and that we've been talking about for a few weeks. I know this month's elements are tracking student progress and, oh gosh, what was our other one? Increasing response rates. So that was kind of our focus for the month, but she could have been using all of these seven. She could have just been using a few of them. So I just want to see what you guys thought. I know that the focus of her lesson today was on China, and I actually took a picture of, let's see, what was her objective for today? We've got, she stated that what made China ideal for early civilization, and what were the key characteristics of the Chinese civilization? So why don't we just start off with that and see what you guys thought about how she met that objective?
She did remind the students of the objective, and it was on the board for them to see. And I felt like she was giving them a preview of what's coming when she mentioned the objective. So she was chunking in a way where she was telling them, here's where we're going to end up, and here's where we are.
Okay. So when you saw the chunking, tell me how, like, let's just talk about how she got there, how she did that. What did that look like?
She started with the map up on the Promethean.
Yep.
So that was showing them where they're talking about because students have no idea of geography.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that helped them kind of visualize more with the Himalaya mountains she mentioned, how that divides China and India. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My geography. And she let them know that that had an effect on what they were going to be learning, why China's civilization was as it is versus they were going to be going into India next.
Okay.
So that was a big chunk for them.
Mrs. Carney, is that something you think you would have, like we talked about before I walked in, things you should see or hear? Is that something you thought you should have seen or heard?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Oh gosh. I don't know how to expand on that.
Well, I was thinking, there was one student had lots of responses, and she's like, "No, we're not talking about that right now."
Right.
Right.
She goes, "We'll get to that."
Right.
Right.
So then she kept bringing them back to something else. Do you remember what she brought them back to?
I remember what she brought him back to. I remember his responses and how she handled it.
Yes, establishing rules and procedures.
Yes.
And
Yes.
she was excellent at.
Yes.
Excellent.
Well, he was discussing food,
Yes.
and she brought them back to
geography.
and why their culture, how the geography affected their culture,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And do you think that tied into the objective of her kind of saying, why was it an ideal society for civilization?
I think so because she's saying that the mountains affected the culture. So she's kind of setting the backdrop.
Yep.
And then going to go see, here's why. Like, here's where the mountains are, and here's how and why they affected their culture. So
Okay.
she's setting
Yep.
herself up for
Okay.
the whole
Yeah.
week coming.
Yeah.
So, what did you see? What did you guys see the kids doing while they're having this conversation? What were the kids doing? What was some of their actions?
They were note taking.
Okay.
But you had students raising their hands and participating,
Okay.
as well as her like praising the students
Okay.
who were getting the answers correct and
Okay.
participating.
And she also was cold calling. So the kids that I think she knows are not always on task, she was calling them anyway,
Okay.
which I do a lot also, just to keep them on their toes. You never know.
Okay. Yeah, and I do think one of the things that, well, I shouldn't say what I think. What I observed was some of them were slower to respond.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were a good portion of students participating, and she did do those cold calls.
Right.
But I think the questioning was at a higher level that they needed think time.
They did.
I noticed some of them like going slower to respond. So I think that,
Yes.
we'd have to talk about, does that mean it's cognitively complex? Because it was a lot of open-ended questions.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she
Almost all of
was.
hers were open-ended questions.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um, so it's just the one kid that wanted to be funny about eating something. Of course, welcome to middle school. As far as establishing rules and procedures, what did you guys see?
On her data wall, she had the rules by class because she teaches two different courses. So each course had its own rules.
Mm-hmm.
My only comment would be that it's so small that I wouldn't have noticed it was
Mm-hmm.
there at first.
One of your wonders. Okay.
Yeah, that was one of my
Okay.
wonders. But she also had their test results, the percentages by class too, which is another way of data and praising because they were doing really well in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I almost wondered when I saw that. That was one of my wonders. Is this a competition that she's discussed with the
Mm-hmm.
classes? Because they were right next to each
Oh
other.
yeah, and they were close.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So go ahead.
All I said was, in getting their notebooks, it was quick. It didn't take much
Mhm.
time. They got right back on
Yeah.
task. So there was obviously, like, this was something they did frequently.
Yeah.
The one student who didn't have the notebook, she was like, okay, I need to check in and see it tomorrow, and then moved on. Like, it was
Yeah.
all.
It didn't stop instruction in
No,
any way.
not
In
at all.
any way. Okay, so one of the things our teachers like to have is some kind of feedback as to how their kids are performing. So, which is based on what we saw today. What would you tell her you saw or you heard?
I mean, I did. I thought there was a good variety of students. It wasn't the same students. Even the one who was making joking comments,
Mm-hmm.
I have him in a class.
Mm-hmm.
I was just impressed that he was participating.
There you go.
So, like, and even though he was making jokes, it was still on the least general topic,
Mhm.
which for that student I felt was a win.
Yep.
So, like, I was impressed at the different varieties of students that she had participating and that were engaged.
Mm-hmm. What do you
And
think?
that boy, she didn't just put it off that we're not talking about that now. She said next week or coming
Mhm.
soon.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
will come
Before the
back to
holidays.
you
Right.
and then you can share with us all of your knowledge.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really good
I
too.
think that was really smart on her part because then the kids know I've got something to look forward to.
Yes, and you're not just
Um,
shutting you down.
Yeah, and it's what I would say to her, what I heard were a lot of those forward comments, those future things we're going to do. So those kids know this is not just a one and done kind of activity.
Right,
Like I'm going to get to know this country well.
right.
So I really like that about it. Okay, well I appreciate you guys participating today, and we'll see where we go next time.
Okay.